Effective studying isn't some magical talent you're just born with. It is a skill, and it's a skill we can absolutely master.
So seriously, why do hours of studying produce almost no results? You know the exact feeling, right? It's that painful, totally relatable scenario where you've been glued to your desk for hours. You're completely buried in textbooks, your notes are scattered everywhere, and there's definitely a half-empty cup of coffee sitting there that went cold like 3 hours ago. You feel like you've put in a massive, exhausting shift. But then, as you're packing up, this horrible, sinking realization washes over you. Despite literally all day at the desk, almost nothing's stuck in your brain. You put in the time, but the knowledge just isn't there. Why on earth does this happen?
Section 1. The illusion of studying. Well, if you've ever lived through that frustrating scenario we just talked about, you can go ahead and breathe a massive sigh of relief right now. Because the core issue here, it isn't laziness. It is absolutely not a lack of intelligence. It is just a fundamental misunderstanding of how learning actually works in the human brain. We've basically been conditioned to picture productivity in a completely backwards way.
The absolute core of this misunderstanding is actually pretty simple. Time spent just does not equal learning achieved. I mean, so many of us automatically equate clocking study hours with actual brain growth. We think, hey, if I sit here staring at this textbook for 6 hours, I'm guaranteed to get 6 hours of solid knowledge downloaded into my brain. But guys, your brain does not measure effort by the sheer amount of time you spend glaring at a page. It literally doesn't care what the clock says. What it actually responds to is focus, attention, and retrieval. Genuine learning takes active, intentional mental engagement, not just passively letting words wash over you.
Okay, let's dive right into this with Section 2, A Tale of Two Students. Let's look at a super realistic scenario to show you exactly where things go wrong, and more importantly, where they go right.
Picture this. On the left, we've got student A. They buckled down for 8 solid hours. But, during that time, they're scrolling social media every few minutes, they're rereading the exact same paragraphs until their eyes glaze over, they're highlighting pretty much the entire page in neon yellow, and they almost never stop to test if they actually get it. Then, on the right, we have student B. Now, student B only hits the books for 2 hours, but those are 2 ruthlessly focused hours. Their phone is in another room, they take purposeful, short breaks, they're actually interrogating the text, and they constantly force themselves to pull information out of their own memory. So I want you to really think about it. Which of these 2 is far more likely to ace a pop quiz on this material a week from now? Moving right along to Section 3, how memory actually works. Student B absolutely crushes this, hands down, even though they spent way less time sitting at that desk. And to really grasp why cognitive engagement totally obliterates total hours spent, we need to take a quick look at the actual science of memory.
What's really fascinating here is the massive difference between familiarity and recall. When student A was just endlessly rereading and coloring in their textbook with highlighters, all they were doing was building familiarity. Reading the same thing over and over creates this super deceptive illusion of learning. You glance at the page and your brain goes, oh yeah, I totally know this. But recognizing something when the answer is staring you right in the face is worlds apart from actively pulling it from your own memory with the book closed. Honestly, familiarity is just a cheap trick your brain plays on you. True recall, that is the gold standard proof that you've actually learned something.
Because at the end of the day, the brain is not a camera. You can't just point your eyeballs at a textbook, mentally hit a shutter button, and snap a high-res permanent image of the chapter. No way! Real learning and the actual strengthening of those neural pathways only happens when your brain is forced to do some heavy lifting. The magic happens when you try to retrieve information without immediately cheating and looking at the answer. That totally uncomfortable struggle to remember? That is literally the exact process that makes the information stick so you can recall it later. All right, Section 4, 3 common study mistakes. Let's break down the specific traps that secretly sabotage our study sessions and create that whole illusion of productivity we've been talking about. Mistake number 1 is passive reading. Man, this one is probably the biggest trap out there. So many of us just repeatedly reread our notes, right? And let's be totally honest, it feels incredibly productive to just pass your eyes over the material a second or third time. But, as we just learned, it really only creates that temporary feeling of familiarity. So here is your new golden rule. If you cannot explain a concept out loud, from memory, in your own simple words, without peeking at your notes, you haven't learned it yet. It's just a mirage.
Mistake number 2 is waiting around for motivation. Come on, how many times have you pushed back a study session because you felt like you just didn't have the motivation yet? The hard truth is that motivation is completely fickle and unpredictable. Some days you wake up ready to conquer the world, and most days you just don't. The students who actually crush it don't rely on a temporary feeling, they rely on bulletproof routines. They know a little secret. Action actually comes before motivation. If you just force yourself to do 3 minutes of focused work, that alone usually sparks the exact motivation you thought you needed to even get started. And mistake number 3, this is a real modern epidemic, is consuming productivity content instead of doing the actual work. Watching YouTube videos of super aesthetic desk setups or binging top 10 study tips makes your brain feel like it's accomplishing something. It totally tricks you. But let's be crystal clear here. Watching a stranger's study on the internet while your own textbook sits there gathering dust is not studying. Building knowledge requires getting your hands dirty with actual, messy practice. We have to spend way less time hunting for the perfect technique and way more time just applying the good ones we already have.
Section 5, the Active Learning Toolkit. Okay, we've dragged our worst habits into the light. Now let's shift gears and give you 3 practical, completely research-backed strategies that you can swap in today to totally change the game.
So here is the exact roadmap for the next time you sit down to work. Step 1, block out your time into highly concentrated focus sessions of about 25 to 50 minutes, and strictly follow that up with a short break. Remember, the goal here is sustained, intense attention, not winning a marathon for the longest time sat at a desk. Step 2 is to constantly ask questions, and Step 3 is to test yourself frequently. Let's actually unpack what those last 2 look like when you're in the trenches.
So, the crucial point is, how do you stay engaged during those 25 to 50 minutes? You have to cultivate active curiosity. Don't just passively swallow a fact, interrogate the thing. Ask yourself, okay, but why does this happen? How does this concept actually function? What would happen if this one specific variable changed? And, the ultimate test, can I explain this whole shebang in my own words? Forcing yourself to answer these specific questions yanks your brain right out of that passive reading trap. It makes you think critically, draw connections, and actually process what's in front of you.
Which brings us to Step 3, testing yourself. Seriously, once you've finished a topic, slam the notebook shut. Try to explain the core concept out loud or scribble down literally everything you can remember on a blank piece of paper. You only open the book back up to compare after you've emptied your brain completely. And listen, when you find gaps, because you will, and when you make mistakes, you have to reframe how you see them. Treat those mistakes as incredibly valuable feedback, not as a personal failure.
At the end of the day, true learning is measured by your ability to understand, remember, and actually apply knowledge out in the wild. It is never, ever measured by the amount of hours you spent locked in your room punishing yourself at a desk. Making consistent, tiny improvements in your active study habits, like using focus blocks, asking the hard questions, and self-testing, is going to give you far better, far more sustainable results than those crazy, panic-fueled marathon reading sessions. It is 100% about the quality of the engagement.
To wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a quick question to chew on. What study habit has wasted the absolute most time for you personally? I would honestly love to hear your experiences and horror stories down in the comments, because recognizing those broken habits is literally the first step to building better ones. Thank you so much for hanging out and learning with me today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for more evidence-based strategies to help you truly master the art of learning. Catch you next time.